joy and thankfulness, there is one uneasy question. What about the future? What will happen now? Will we, the people who have won the war, drive home our victory against fascism by defeating our pre-war enemies of poverty and unemployment?
Peter, clearly a labour of love for Loach, this film.
Yes, I think it is. It's a rather kind of nostalgist film in some ways. It's very different from the kind of post-Michael Moore generation of movie. It's even different from the generation of people who just generally working in TV and film. I mean, another type of movie would have obviously used the clip, Danny Boyle's clip about the NHS in the London Olympics. That's kind of route one. But Ken Loach doesn't do that. He goes straight back to the source, straight back to the original world of 1945. And using archive clips and interviewing, making a point of not interviewing the grandees or the high-ups, but the doctors and the nurses and the trade unionists. He tries to reintroduce that whole spirit, as he says. It's about the spirit of 1945. What was it like in 1945? To reject Winston Churchill in an extraordinary way. Even now it's considered to be a form of heresy to criticise Churchill. But if it is a heresy, it's a heresy of which a huge number of people were guilty in 1945, at the very point you would think that they wouldn't be. I found myself gradually acclimatising to this movie. It is rather kind of stately, I have to say. Another type of movie would have been much more energised, particularly towards the end. They would have said, OK, here's what we do now to reintroduce. They would have done much more. There would be web links and email addresses, and what do you do now? That's what another kind of post-Moore documentary would do.
Direct action, re-energising the grassroots
exactly.
and all of that.
That's what another type of movie. But Ken Loach, from the generation he is, I sense there was something slightly stately about it.
Well, what was interesting about it for me is that it does identify that absolute patriotism that resulted in the Beveridge Report and the creation of the welfare state and National Health Service and nationalisation of railways and power and things like that. Then it jumps to 1979, where suddenly Thatcher's there and she's dismantling it all.
Yes.
And there wasn't a kind of context of why that was allowed to happen.
No.
Was that a problem for you, Henry?
You're right, it does leap to the Thatcher years almost as an afterthought and say, oh, and by the way, this is what happened and it all fell apart. And it's one of these recent documentaries that, as Peter says, doesn't really seem to have a call to arms to it, which, particularly with this, I found incredibly frustrating because, similar to a film like Chasing Ice, like there is a portrait of this is an indication of what might be happening to our society, but there's nobody there saying, come on, get up and let's do something about it.
It's a glorious memorial.
Yeah, and I think Loach in that interview that we just saw talked about it being a historical resource, which it undoubtedly will be. It is a very interesting portrait of these people, a lot of whom are in their 80s and might not be around for long, talking about what happened at the time. But that has to be the jump-off point for doing something about it. And it just isn't. It literally leaves you with this very unsatisfactory feeling of, oh, that happened a few decades ago.
This is Nye Bevan and the matron Anne Dolan walking from the main building down towards the gate. This said this was handing over the key of the hospital. There wasn't a key handed over, that was just the way they said the health service was born.
The thing that stands out, sounds so petty this, but we had jam scones for tea. Do you remember that? Each and every one of us. Food was still rationed. We had jam scones for tea. Oh dear God, that's marvellous.